I'm Gunther Verheyen. I call myself an independent Scrum caretaker. I call myself an independent Scrum caretaker on a journey of humanizing the workplace. As you may know, I like to read stuff for you. In the past, I've read the previous edition of my book, Scrum A Pocket Guide. I've read several articles of my book, 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know, together with their respective authors, by the way. Today, I'd like to read something else. I've recently made an English translation of an originally Dutch written article. It's an article by Professor Piet Hoebeke regarding the rights of trans women. And I would like to read that for you. Piet Hoebeke is a well-known Belgian urologist at the Ghent University Hospital, and is also a dean at the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences of the Ghent University. He is actively involved in multidisciplinary teams addressing sexual development disorders and gender dysphoria. After some hesitation, Professor Hoebeke decided to respond to the verdict of the British High Court regarding the position and rights of trans women in the United Kingdom. As you might remember, the court ruled that the definition of sex in the Equality Act refers to biological sex only, meaning the gender as recorded at the time of birth of an individual. This means that the changed gender of the people commonly referred to as trans people is not respected, despite them holding a gender recognition certificate, meaning that they've had their new gender legally recognized. According to the British court, trans women can therefore not claim access to spaces or activities that are women only. Professor Hoebeke shared his viewpoint in this ruling in an article published by the Belgian newspaper called the Morgen. It was published on the 22nd of April 2025 in the print edition of the paper as well as the online edition. I am glad that Professor Hoebeke raised his voice anyhow. He's highly experienced in the matter. He's worked and is guiding several trans people while having deep scientific and medical knowledge in the matter. His overall claim is that the verdict of the British High Court seems to be built upon the assumption that trans women only want to pretend to be women, merely disguise as women. He regrets how thereby several available modern insights are being ignored. I admired how Professor Hoebeke in his article eloquently put words to emotions, feeling, convictions and evidence regarding the topic. He did so in a way that I wished I could, but what he did totally surpasses my ability to put such words together in proper phrases regarding this topic. I liked his article a lot because it was inspiring, it was clear, based on evidence, based on practical experience. Above all, it puts people first. And most importantly, it corrects many of the ruling, simplistic ideas concerning the sophisticated and complex ecosystem that the human body is, and of gender and sexuality or sex specifically. I'm humbled that Professor Hoebeke allowed me to translate his article into English to share it with my network of readers and followers. I see it as a sort of extension of my mission of humanizing the workplace to, maybe temporarily, to humanizing society. I've slightly edited and expanded the original article when translating it to emphasize that this is more than a legal matter only, and this is more than a legal matter only in the UK only. So I will hope you enjoy my translation of the article. The title is Trans Women Are Women. Not a different species, not an exception, not a threat, just women. And the author is Professor Piet Hoebeke. Doubt. That is what I initially felt when the verdict of the British High Court was made public. The court judged that the notion woman in specific legislation only applies to someone who was registered as a woman at the time of birth, thereby ruling out trans women, even when they have their change of gender legally recorded. I doubted whether to respond, because every time that I speak out about the rights of trans people, a flood of outrage and accusations comes my way. Not in the least via all sorts of digital platforms and channels. However, remaining silent, certainly in this case, felt like weakness, even cowardice. I decided that this is not the time to remain silent, given the ignorance of the scientific truth, fundamental human rights, and the ongoing vicious attacks and bashing of this vulnerable group in society. It kept me awake by night, or at night, so find hereby my response. So Professor Hoebeke continues to say, what stands out for me is that trans women are firstly women. They are not a separate species, not a separate type of people, not an exception, not a threat. They are women that are part of our society and whose existence is as legitimate as that of cis women. This case that ultimately made me speak out again actually already started in 2018 as a legal disagreement between the Scottish government and the committee called For Women Scotland, FWS. The Scottish government wanted to offer trans women holding a gender recognition certificate, GRC, the same legal protection and rights that cis women have. FWS disputed that right before local courts first, arguing that sex-related protection and rights should be preserved for people that were born as women and are therefore biologically women. After the rejection of their claim in 2022, FWS was granted permission to take the case to the UK Supreme Court. That court now follows the reasoning of FWS. Susan Smith, co-founder of the committee, was clearly relieved when she stated that the High Court confirmed that women should be protected based upon their biological sex and biological sex only. She said spaces intended for women will from now on really be for women. At first sight, this might indeed sound like a victory for women's rights. However, if we look beyond the surface, the real signal of this verdict is that trans women are not really women. It's even worse, as the signal is that trans women are a threat to cis women. The underlying thinking is that a trans woman, thus biologically born as a man, presents a danger and a threat in spaces for women. It reduces trans women to men in disguise that abuse their transition to enter spaces that are reserved for women only. The suggestion is that the aim of their transition is to spy on and ultimately potentially abuse the women present in those spaces. This train of thought is more than just highly stigmatizing, completely absurd. These people do not wish to pretend to be women, but have a deep desire to actually be women, exist as women. Too few people seem to grasp that going through a long process of gender transition is socially, medically and personally a far from fast and easy journey, far from being the quick result of an impulsive overnight decision, implemented almost like overnight. Trans women have to wade through tons of administration, are subjected to extensive hormonal therapies, have to consider undergoing gender-affirming surgery, and often have to overcome hostile reactions, both verbally as physically, from their close as well as their wider environment, up to the point of being rejected. There is not a single person that makes the choice to go through all these steps and processes, which by the way takes several years, lightly. Let alone do it only to be able to peek at other women and commit acts of sexual aggression. On a side note regarding sexual aggression, there are far more serious problems to tackle than the unfounded implicit accusations projected on trans women. The numbers are even devastating. In a survey of about 5,800 people that was mirroring the Belgian population, it was conducted between July 2021 and August 2022, more than 16% of women responded that they have been the victim of sexual aggression at some point of their life. The inconvenient truth is that these acts of sexual aggression are almost exclusively committed by cis men. In most cases, these men are even known to their victims, rather than being some faraway stranger in the dark. The exact numbers might differ, but the overall trends are the same in other countries. By the way, there is also the simple fact that a vast majority of trans women is heterosexual. They are attracted by men, just like cis women are. The hidden accusation of wanting to spy on, seduce or violate cis women is not just wrong, but reveals actually a rigid social bias. The science, by the way, also tells a different story about gender identity. Research increasingly shows how gender identity is at least partially also rooted in our genes and not merely in our chromosomes. Thus, although our genes are clearly not a part of it, they are still a part of our biology, thus revealing a possible biological basis for gender dysphoria. Various genetic, hormonal and neurological factors play a role in the coming into existence of the female gender identity of people that are biologically born as men. There is a biological foundation for this. Some studies have found important differences in the brain, structurally as well as functionally, that support the gender identity of trans women. Nature is more complex and sophisticated than the common binary view on X and Y chromosomes. Gender is more than an emotion or a feeling. It is anchored in someone's natural identity and is as real as physical, sexual characteristics. What I find even more striking is the near-exclusive focus on trans women. It seems to imply that trans men, people born biologically as women but identifying themselves as men, are not perceived as problematic. Nobody seems to believe that they would transition merely to invite typical men's spaces and have a better view on someone else's willy. I see only one explanation for this difference. We still strongly cling on to the cultural stereotype that men are dangerous and women are to be protected from that danger. According to the ruling of the British High Court, trans women are a part of the first category, while trans men disappear from the radar. This is a confirmation of the ideological and selective nature of the gender debate, rather than a rational one based on science. The impact of this verdict of the British High Court is much more than just a legal matter. It is an unfortunate confirmation of the widespread misunderstanding of gender dysphoria in society. The implication is that our society says that we will only protect people whose gender identity matches what was recorded on their birth certificate. We should wonder what sort of society we aspire being if we systematically exclude people, fellow human beings, based upon irrational fears, assumptions and scientific ignorance. Trans women are not a threat. They are people in the first place, human beings. They deserve recognition, respect and safety. They deserve being treated equally. Anyone using the arguments of safety and the danger of physical harassment to exclude trans women from spaces designated for women is not championing women's rights, but maintaining an outdated status quo. Women's rights cannot be used to exclude other women. That is not equality. Trans women are not a threat. What is a threat is imposing legislation to increase inequality and unequal treatment of people. It is time to stand up and to say clearly that feminism is much needed, but cannot be founded on exclusion and expulsion. It is time to stand up for all women and demand equal rights for all women. Let me share a little bit of background on Professor Piet Hoebeke, who wrote the article originally in Dutch. So Professor Piet Hoebeke is a prominent Belgian urologist at Ghent University Hospital and is currently also serving as the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Science at the Ghent University. He is recognized for his expertise in pediatric urology, urogenital reconstruction, adolescent urology and disorders of sexual development. He is actively involved in multidisciplinary teams addressing sexual development disorders and gender dysphoria. Professor Hoebeke has authored and co-authored many peer-reviewed publications. He is a respected voice in both medical and societal debates for his contributions to public discussions on gender and sexuality. By the way, you can find all relevant URLs and links in the description of this recording. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you got something out of it. I hope at least it made you think about what is it that makes us human beings and what defines our gender.